Hello there. In this week's episode of the Data Vault Radio Show, in the wake of ChatGPT having a little bit of a meltdown, we'll be taking a look at a conversation around why you need to build resilience into your data platforms with Dan Linstedt, the inventor of Data Vault. At the same time, I'll be interviewing Jonas de Keuster from Vaultspeed, and I'll be bringing you up to speed with all the news from around the data management universe, or world. Universe is pretty big. All that and more coming up right now in the Data Vault Radio Show. Welcome to the latest episode of the Data Vault Radio Show. Unless you're watching or listening to this from the future, in which case this is the archive and it's not the latest episode, but it's still the future, in which case I'm really sorry about that whole climate change thing. We did try and warn the politicians and they just didn't listen. Anyway, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Paul Barlow. One of the other things I do is also coordinate the community over at the Data Vault Innovators community. It's a free site that you can join, that you can go and talk to other people who work in data management from around the world, learn from the experts, pose questions to them, as well as check out things like some of the public meetups that we've got coming up, including one that we've got coming up in March in London with the help of Scalefree. But you can check out all the information for that on that forum. So to help you get there, we're going to magically put up the address like magic. It's also in the description with a clickable link that you can go to, and it's completely free. So head along, introduce yourself, and say hi to everyone. In this week's episode, we've got a whole bunch of really fascinating stuff to sit down and look at, inspired by that horrible nightmare that happened last week when ChatGPT had weird meltdown moments, giving me flashbacks to Terminator 2 and pretty much any other movie where AI goes completely insane and destroys humanity. So we're going to have a look back at a piece of content that we did in December last year with Dan Linstedt, who's actually the inventor of Data Vault, around the need to build resilient systems and ways that we can do that. We also have a great interview today with Jonas de Keuster from Vaultspeed. But before we get to that, let's catch up with this week's news. Actually, before we have news, let's have some olds. Today's show falls on February 29, which is a leap year. All of the other months in the Julian calendar actually have 30 or 31 days, but February lost out to the ego of Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus. Under his predecessor, Julius Caesar, February had 30 days, and the month named after him, July, had 31. But August only had 29 days. When Caesar Augustus became emperor, he added 2 days to his month to make August the same as July. So February lost out to August in the battle of extra days. All the latest breaking news from ancient Rome, I guess. How about we get into the actual news around Data Vault and information management for this week? As we picked up last week, the impact of Google Gemini's 1.5 model continues to make the news with its 1 million token context window, meaning it can analyze and understand complex code bases and videos. In fact, the model can answer complex questions about the video content and has the potential to be used for in-depth coding tasks. In open source news related to code generation, something that caught our eye this week was Open Code Generator, a model developed specifically to improve the quality and speedily iterate code generation. In their paper published on Hugging Face, they announced that while the introduction of large language models has significantly advanced code generation, the challenge with open source models is that they often lack the execution capabilities and iterative refinement of advanced systems like ChatGPT-4 Code Interpreter. Open Code Interpreter is a family of open source code systems designed for generating, executing, and iteratively refining code. The innovative integration of execution and human feedback marks a significant leap forward in the domain. By harnessing compiler diagnostics to correct errors and incorporating human insights for code refinement, the model achieves a yet unparalleled balance of accuracy and user alignment. Its performance on widely recognized benchmarks, including Human Eval and MBPP, demonstrates its superior ability to iteratively refine code, achieving results that narrow the performance gap with proprietary systems like GPT-4's Code Interpreter. This model heralds a new era in code generation, offering open source systems that rival the sophistication and efficacy of their proprietary counterparts. You can find more about this on GitHub at the Open Code Generator, and we'll have a link below on the research paper for you to be able to check out as well. In policy news, Stanford University published a paper on February 22nd entitled Rethinking Privacy in the AI Era, Policy Provocations for the Data-Centric World, presented by Jennifer King and Caroline Meinhardt. These papers presented a series of arguments and predictions about how existing and future privacy and data protection regulation will impact the development and deployment of AI systems. Amongst those was the prediction that given that data is the foundation of all AI systems, going forward, AI development will continue to increase developers' hunger for training data, fueling an even greater race for data acquisition than we've seen in the past couple of decades. One argument mooted was that largely unrestrained data collection poses unique risks to privacy that extend beyond the individual level. They aggregate to pose societal level harms that cannot be addressed through the exercise of individual data rights alone. Another point made is that while existing and proposed privacy legislation grounded in the globally accepted Fair Information Practices, or FIPs, implicitly regulate AI development, are not sufficient to address the data acquisition race as well as the resulting individual and systemic privacy harms. Lastly, and this one will be of particular interest to Data Vault professionals, is that even though different legislation contains explicit provisions on algorithmic decision-making and other forms of AI, it does not provide the data governance measures needed to meaningfully regulate the data used in AI systems. So what we've done is put together 3 suggestions on how you could mitigate the risks to data privacy posed by the development and adaptation of AI. They include denormalizing data collection by default by shifting away from an opt-out to an opt-in collection. Data collectors must facilitate true data minimization through privacy by default strategies. Number 2, focus on the AI data supply chain to improve privacy and data protection. Ensuring dataset transparency and accountability across the entire lifecycle has to be the focus. And then thirdly, flip the script on the creation and management of personal data. Policymakers should support the development of new governance mechanisms and technical infrastructure, for example, data intermediaries and data permissioning infrastructures that support the exercising of individual data rights. For more information on this paper and to access your own copy, there'll be links in the bio below. Last up this week is Grok, spelled G-R-O-Q, a groundbreaking language processing unit, a physical chip that resides next to the CPUs and GPUs to specifically speed up language processing, transforming the end-user experience as they interact with LLMs using natural language. To put that in context, it means it can run programs like Meta's Llama 2 LLM far faster than before. With the explosion of LLMs, the graphics processing unit is probably the weakest link in the generative AI ecosystem, and Grok is an inference engine on a chip. It's designed to accelerate end-to-end inference to deliver substantial performance, efficiency, and precision. This is the world's first language processing unit inference engine purpose-built for inference performance and precision. The LPU resides in the data center alongside CPUs and GPUs that enable training, and customers can choose on-premise deployment or API access. This delivers inference that wows with low latency and real-time delivery. If you'd like to watch the recent CNN interview demonstrating the speeds that the inference engine can pick up on and respond to with speech, check out the post that we've got in the Data Vault Innovators community, but I'll also post a link for you as well down in the description. By the way, the name Grok actually comes from an old science fiction novel called Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein, and it means to understand everything, especially when looked at deeply and with empathy. Right, that's it for the news this week. As I said before, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, spread the word about what's going on here, or head over to the Data Vault Innovators community and have your say. Speaking of the Innovators community, I had a chance this week to actually sit down and have a chat to one of their sponsors. Jonas de Keuster, who is the Vice President of Marketing for Vaultspeed, joined me for a conversation in, wasn't the wee small hours for me, but it was getting kind of late for him. It was, quite a fascinating one. I'm kind of interested to know why so many people who work in Data Vault seem to enjoy riding bikes. It's a bit weird. But look, you'll learn a bit more about that during this interview with Jonas right now, so stay tuned. Let's learn a little bit about him. Jonas, thank you very much for joining me. Very much appreciated. I guess the first question for you is, what should people know about Vaultspeed?
Well, Vaultspeed is a data warehouse automation tool or data lakehouse automation tool, whatever platform you're trying to build these days. Actually, our tool is is based on a methodology called Data Vault. Hence, we're here on the show about the Data Vault innovators community, of course. And it's a twofold approach, or we actually also like to call it a two-staged approach, like a rocket that has multiple stages. You need to have these two stages to get into orbit, into outer space. It works a bit the same with Vaultspeed, and the two stages are as follows. First, we kind of help you to automate an integration layer based on Data Vault. That's the first stage. For that, we have set up our product in a way that it's an entirely no-code approach. So you really engage with our product through data modeling, and based on the data models that you ingest in Vaultspeed, your source data models, we build you a proposal, and that proposal it's up to you to either accept those proposals or to change them a little bit and to change them towards what you actually need. And if you've done enough of that modeling in Vaultspeed, you get your data integration layer, your data vault layer generated for you. We generate the code, we generate the structure, the transformation code, the workflow code, everything. And then you can get that integration layer up and running. And then that second stage is actually where you can build additional business logic on top of that very robust, very well-structured data integration layer. And with that, you could automate practically anything into a star schema, a data mart, or anything else you'd like to use.
It sounds like a very resilient model.
Absolutely. If you look at Data Vault, we've been calling it like the foundation layer. So the actual layer where you put your Data Vault, we call it the foundation layer since 2010. I don't know, ever since we started with Data Vault, because it's indeed so resilient. It basically acts as, when you're building a house, you build your foundation, and on top of that, you start building the additional floors, right? And it's a bit the same with Data Vault. It can act as the foundation for whatever you want to do next with your data, whatever you want to do downstream or on those upper floors. So it's really there to keep the house from falling apart. That's how we look at it.
That's something everybody wants. Nobody wants a house that's going to fall apart.
No, absolutely not.
So how did you get into the world of data management then?
Well, it's a bit of a funny story, because actually I had an education in, yeah, we call it here in Belgium, we call it business engineering, something like that. So it's partially economics, a lot of science, exact science, and both exact and human science actually. And I did a major in finance, so I was actually bound to go work in a bank or something. And then when I started looking for a job, I stumbled across this consulting company that did data warehousing and everything that comes with it, and it kind of catched my interest. So yeah, next thing I knew, I was working for them. Had a couple of interesting projects in data warehousing, building more the downstream stuff, the presentation areas. Also did some work on reporting and dashboarding, working with like end users, business users. Had an interesting project for a while in the UK, in London. And yeah, after a while, it became clear that the consulting in which I started was investing more and more in automation to distinguish themselves from, let's say, other companies that had a lot more manpower and could build a lot more stuff with the amount of people that they had. So we started being smart, and we started investing in automation frameworks. And then many years, let's say 5-6 years later, we ventured that into what we know as Vaultspeed today. So it's a story of about 12 years now, and
Oh, wow.
pretty interesting. Yeah.
It's a long journey. So how do you unwind then? Do you have a sports team that you support, or do you play an instrument, or build board games?
I'm not. No musical talent was lost to me.
I
Although
know
I
the
like
feeling.
music, but I'm really not good at it. Playing a guitar or something, I would love to have been able to do it, but no, not at all. But I do like sports. Actually, I like. I'm a big fan. Of course, we're here in Belgium, so people might know that we are big fans of cycling,
Mhm.
like pro road cycling. And I did a bit of that, or quite a bit of that myself. Aged, I think, 14 years old, I got my first race bike, and yeah, started training, and later on also doing a few races. Actually, the last race I did was, well, already when I was working. I was
Mhm.
That was in 2016, 17, something like
Oh,
that, I
wow.
think. Um, and then I did a lot of cycling also in what we call Grand Fondos. Don't know if that term is known around the
Not to
world,
me.
but it's like these huge epic rides you can do in the Alps, or in the mountain regions, mountain stages you have in the, like those big stages you have in the Tour de France.
Mhm.
Well, they do them 3 weeks in a row. We did one of those just as an amateur cyclist trying to do that as well. So yeah, I was quite fond of it. Invested quite a lot of money in all the material and the stuff and the bike
Mhm.
and everything you need. But yeah, hobby like another. And I still enjoy it, although I have a little bit less time for it now. I have two kids. Um,
Oh, those take up so much time.
they don't like daddy to go out for the entire Sunday morning.
Do they get a say? Are they old enough to get a say on that?
Well, they're young enough to for me to not have a say.
Oh, fair
Let's
enough.
put it like that. Yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah.
What about reading? What was the last book you read?
Actually, I'm reading a book. Yeah, it's mix and match. Sometimes I read something that is more uh, tied to my professional life. So I'm
Mhm.
actually reading a book like right now. It's called Inspired. It's a book around product management and yeah, getting new ideas on how to manage products and products marketing. So that's more related to my professional work, I would say. Um, Otherwise, if I read a book purely for fun, it should be a good thriller, crime thriller. I've read a few books from a guy called Alan Folsom, who
Mhm.
writes crazy. I think a few of his books were put into a movie. John Grisham, same thing, or some books that are tied to history. I actually just ordered a book that talks. There's this new Apple TV series online, which is called Masters of the Air. They follow the bombers in World War II and stuff. And actually, it's based on a book, so I ordered the book because someone I knew said, "Yeah, I should read it. It's a good historical piece, and it also tells a story about these people." And I like that. I it can be fiction for me, but if there's some historic event tied to it, that's what I prefer.
Paper, like paper books, or do you prefer to read digital on something like a Kindle?
Uh, Depends a little bit. Yeah, for me, if it's let's say it again, if it's professional, maybe just a Kindle, that's easier, or you can read it on a. But the let's say if I'm on a beach somewhere, I just like to hold an old-fashioned book still.
Mhm. I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. What about television? Do you have a favorite science fiction show or movie?
Uh, Science fiction to me, it should involve something about space. If
Mhm.
you show me a movie like Interstellar, or there's like a TV series as well on Apple TV, it's called for all humankind or something.
For all mankind.
It's for all mankind. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a series that is kind of a parallel universe between
Mm.
what we know today and what might have been if the space race had continued up until this point. And it contains a little bit of everything.
Mm.
It's dramatic. It's sci-fi. I mean, there's a series or season in there where in the in the Near East, the years 2000, 2001, people are on Mars and have a full blown colony out there. It's kind of sci-fi. It's not that far out, but
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it's realistic enough to still believe it.
I really love
Yeah,
the opening of that series where,
yeah,
it sets it
but
up
that's
like you're
funny,
watching the
isn't it?
moon landing in the 60s. And yeah, that twist that it's the Russians that have landed first, that sets up
My God! And then
everything.
the
Yeah.
Neil Armstrong's landing is like just barely, and it's
Yeah.
a whole other story. And also when I mean in the 60s in the US, yeah, gender equality was,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, not the hottest topic, and then all of a sudden the Russians brought the first woman to the moon, and in the US, like, we need a bunch of female
Yeah.
astronauts now. And I mean, in a way, it's also a funny series because
Mm-hmm.
they kind of play tricks on, yeah, guys, we could have also done it like that. So yeah, good, a good watch for people that
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
seen it yet.
It's a great show, that one. I actually need to catch up on the last season, but the rest of it's been absolutely brilliant. I've really enjoyed it.
I finished season 4, I think, last December,
Oh,
during
okay.
Christmas holidays. Yeah,
That's a good time to catch up on TV shows, and you've got time to actually sit down and watch them.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me, do you have any pet peeves? Like little things that annoy you, particularly when you're working with things like data management, like little things that a client might do, or that seems to be sort of common practice that just bug you?
Um, hmm. Yeah, there's definitely things that would annoy me. I can't really think of one right now, but like, let's say just pushing stuff out there that hasn't been fully tested yet or fully completed, like tinkering with code where people shouldn't really tinker with. I mean, I I'm actually when I was actually doing data management projects myself still, and that was, I think, up until 2021, I was still active on one of them. I was somebody who always took like the practical approach, like, let's get shit done and make sure that it works. And yeah, sometimes that means you might need to take a little shortcut, but as long as you realize that you made a shortcut and you know you can fix it later on, um, that's fine for me. But if you start bending stuff and yeah, that kind of annoys me. Another thing is people in data management. There's a lot of people in data management that claim to know what they're talking about, but don't really know
Mhm.
what they
Oh
are
yeah,
talking about. And yeah, as soon as I catch people like that, I'm like, come on. I mean, let us let us handle it. I mean,
yeah.
stay clear because you don't know what you're saying. Yeah, things like that.
Oh yeah. No, I've dealt with a lot of those in my time, and they are so frustrating. They just,
It's like
yeah,
the political beasts, no?
yeah,
The political animals. Those guys, yeah, hard to
yeah.
cope
Think they
with.
know what's going on. Not a real clue, but they'll throw out big words and think it makes them sound smart.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, that's it. That's like all my questions. See, super fast, super painless. Where can people find more information about Vaultspeed?
Obviously on our website, so www.vaultspeed.com. And on that website, there's like specific sections. There's a resources section where you can read a lot of blog posts. We also have a community webpage that is purely talking about Vaultspeed. It's kind of a place where you can learn from others that also use Vaultspeed. Obviously, us Vaultspeeders are also in that community to answer any questions about the product and stuff. So that's a very valuable resource. And yeah, I'd say people that really want to give Vaultspeed a try, we have these hands-on demo sessions where you can just register, get yourself a user, and we talk you through how the product works. That's three very fast ways to get to know more about the product.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jonas. I'll let you get back to your evening so you can sleep and I do all the work during the day. Sounds like a really good setup for you, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost 10:30 here.
Same here.
I'll
End.
be watching. I'll be watching out for the recording when I wake up in the morning.
Fantastic. It'll be there waiting for you. Thank you very much.
Good to hear. See you, Paul. Bye.
Hey, I want to thank Jonas again for sitting down and joining me for a conversation. It was incredibly educational, and I have to admit, very gracious with his patience because I kept screwing up the time zones between here and Europe, and he was incredibly patient and very kind about it. So thank you very much for that, Jonas. It is very much appreciated. Now, earlier this week, you may have heard about ChatGPT having a little bit of a weird kind of hissy fit or meltdown. On the 21st of February, for about 6 hours, ChatGPT started spewing nonsense and gibberish out to people. And I totally get it. I do exactly the same thing on the 21st of February every year. Because it's my birthday, I'm human, and the scepter of that inexorable march towards death gets closer and closer with every birthday I have. But ChatGPT doesn't have that problem because, one, it's not human, but also it's a large language model built on black box technology. And that's a little bit of a problem here because that means, well, engineers might not be able to work out what the fault is that caused it. All they can do is create a bug patch for it so it doesn't happen again. But because they can't work out what the fault was, it means that they can't guarantee it's never going to happen again. And that's a real problem for anybody working on any kind of system. There comes questions with it around resilience and how to build system resilience in what you're doing and what you're building. But that reminded me of a piece of content that we actually made in December last year with Dan Linstedt, who's the inventor of Data Vault. The question that they were asking was around the resilience of system building, because in Australia, not long before we recorded, one of their largest telcos actually went offline and 10 million people were without a form of communication. And that had far-reaching ramifications. So here's that conversation from December 2023 with Dan Linstedt, Michael Olschimke, Nols, Ebersohn, and Julien Redmond when they take a look at the need for resilience in systems and what you could do to build more resilient systems going forward.
The question came in separately to what just happened over the last couple of days in Australia. But for Dan and Michael, we had our second largest telco go down for 12 hours, like literally no landline, no internet, no mobile phone, more than 10 million people affected. In a country of 25 million, that's a lot. Hospitals are affected, transport systems are affected, and it was chaos. And unfortunately, I happened to use that network. So it was an interesting day. The question's actually about resiliency. So how do you build resiliency in your platforms, especially around your information hubs, when so much of where we're going is going to be based on the data hub kind of idea? How do we start building resiliency into those systems when so much of it's automated and maybe a bit black box? Dan, let's start with you on your thoughts.
I'll try to keep it short. And everybody chuckles when I say that because I'm long-winded. But so the first is you got to have a good governance program. The second is that you've got to have you've got to have good security, and you've got to be aware of privacy laws, because in order to have resiliency, you need a platform that can support replication And this includes replication in the cloud. Now, if you're talking about an outage like you just mentioned, you better not be replicating in a cloud inside your country, because your outage will be affected. Your outage will affect everything in your own country. And this is why you need a security program or a cybersecurity program along with good governance, so that you know what data you can replicate safely overseas or to another country, quote unquote, a friendly country, let's hope, right? Because there are laws against promoting data or copying data to an unfriendly, quote unquote, country. But there, it goes beyond that. The security officer needs to be able to define policies that dictate, well, if this data is leaving our country, this stuff better be two-way encrypted or one-way encrypted or encrypted this way or stored, this way. So there's lots of different ways, and you have to worry about in transit and everything else. Now, if you're using a platform like Snowflake makes it technically possible to copy stuff from country to country, cloud to cloud, just by turning it on. So without good governance, you run a lot of risk, right? Without good policies and without good understanding of security, you run a tremendous amount of risk. But the flip side of that is resiliency. So if you have good governance and you have good security, and you can follow the rules and meet the audits and the government regulatory agency bodies and all that, then you can leverage a cloud in another country as resiliency, as failover. But it still won't solve the accessibility problem if it's your telco that goes down, as the case you just mentioned, because everybody in that one country still can't get at their data. However, if you're a global organization, and here's where it pays off. If you're a global organization, the rest of the organization can still get at the data, even though the telco in your country is down. Now, this also begs the use of cloud technology, because when you come back online, the last thing you want is to scramble your IT resources to have them playing catch up, to have them funneling the data across and trying to figure out how to replicate the most recent copies and all that. You want the tech platform to take care of it for you, to recognize all of the stuff that would have changed or didn't change or did change while you were gone. And when you came back online, to resync those databases for you. So all of that stuff should be expected from whatever platform you choose to build this on. And so these are some of the things that I would think of.
Yeah, Michael, you got any thoughts? Is this just you must have multi-cloud, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I would say I remember. So here's the thing. So people make great plans and how to deal with certain scenarios, but the problem is, or what the number one, or what for me at least, a very important action or a very important concept is. I remember one client where we essentially came to the office one day and working on some data warehouse project. That was actually before my data vault days, to be honest. But it doesn't matter. So we were sitting there, and when I came to the office, and everything was down, because just like in your country, nothing worked. So all the file shares where they had the data didn't work. It was production environment, production client in production, and they couldn't produce anything. No products. The factories were down. You couldn't work in the back. It was nothing. Well, first day we were making fun of it the first day, but then end of business day we got a bit curious what's going on, and then 2 days later, sitting there, I mean, everybody was heads down essentially. The problem was they made a plan for a backup, and they backed up for years, and it worked for a while, apparently, yeah. But then when they need to restore something, they realized nobody tested the backup, so it didn't work, right? And that's so testing, that's for me is a keyword here. I mean, we know a lot of tests in Data Vault, testing the metadata, checking for consistencies across the naming conventions, for example, or how you, let's say, turn a data set into a Data Vault, for example. We have regression tests, unit testing in Data Vault, how we test the business vault. We have tests for the role Data Vault, and so on. But so many people don't do it. That's really weird, in my opinion. So I would really emphasize testing here.
Yep. Good insight. Nols, do you have anything to add on this particular topic?
it's one of those things that for organizations that were impacted, some of them, this is not going to be cheap because we've leveraged the scale of economy and the cost savings about going to places like the cloud and all of those type of things. No need to maintain your own data center and all those type of things anymore. And so that is then resulted in we've got all these savings, except it's not cheap because the redundancies, the resilience has been neglected. So not for everyone, clearly, but some of the organizations out there, that's directly here in the Australian context, but I think it's a wake-up call to most organizations that some of them will have to go all the way from, okay, just upgrade my subscriptions to actually bring the jackhammers because we need to put in more connections. And so there's going to be some literally physical and virtual impacts to all of this. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to have these reminders come around. And I say that from perspective. For instance, we had bushfires not far from our farm in the last little while, and we've had ideas on how to do and fight the bushfires, etc. And then when the bushfires became real, well, the measures became real, right? And so fortunately, all of our efforts were a dry run, which is awesome, but it highlighted a few things. And so I want to echo what Michael has said. It's one thing to have resilience. It's another thing whether you've tested it. And so absolutely. So sometimes these unfortunate incidents should form a good basis for getting some rigor or governance or resilience back into focus.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many. So this isn't just a technical problem either, right? You've got to think at a business level, where are our single points of failure? In this example, everyone in their business used their own network. So as soon as their network was down, they couldn't communicate with each other. Yep. That delayed the fix by hours. So you have to think, and there's a cost to having a backup network or a backup to everything in your infrastructure, but you've got single points of failure, and that's where it's going to fail, right? So
that was a pretty fascinating conversation to sit down and listen to, particularly in light of what we've had in the last week and what they were dealing with at the time. And they are fantastic experts with a huge amount of knowledge that I'm not going to argue with. But if you want to have a chat to them or get to meet other experts, don't forget you can always visit the Data Vault Innovators community, which is magically appearing on screen like magic again right now. It's also, again, in the description below. It's completely free to join. Pop on over, come say hi, and get to meet all of the others out there. In the meantime, if you're in or around London on, say, the 14th of March, make sure you check out what Scale Free are doing. They've got a great big meet up over there for people of the Data Vault Innovators community. It's a one-day workshop, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in there. So make sure you check out their website or the information that you can find on that Data Vault Innovators community. Until next week, I've been your host, Paul Barlow. Thank you very much for joining me, and once again, may the force be with you.